This is the Remote Podcast, and I'm your host, Victor Kung. You're listening to episode 7. Hello and welcome to the Remote Podcast, episode 7. This podcast is all about location independence, digital nomadism, and living life on your own terms. Each week we interview a new guest on the show, and this week I sat down with Gaurav Valani, who through his organization Career Sprout helps millennials find meaningful work so that they can build a purpose-driven career. Gaurav has a really interesting backstory. He told me that he never wanted to be an entrepreneur. He spent the first 6 years out of college hopping around jobs because he didn't know what he wanted to do. 10 jobs to be exact. That was until he got into the recruiting and staffing industry. In the beginning, he was attracted by the high pay you could earn through commissions, but over time, he developed a keen interest and passion for helping others find the right jobs for them. Now he spends each day trying to disrupt the staffing industry to make it more human-oriented and people-focused. His story is a great example of how you can find your calling in the most unlikely ways. So let's get started. Hey Gaurav, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
So I'm really excited to be able to interview you today because since the first time we met at the Hive Global Leadership Program, I just remember distinctly having very good conversations with you.
Oh, thanks. Likewise.
So to give the audience a bit of a background, Gaurav is an entrepreneur and he previously worked at TrueBridge, a staffing agency in the West Coast, and he helped grow that company, and it eventually exited for quite a sizable sum. So now Gaurav is working on some very interesting new projects. He's actually working on 2 of them, which we'll get into more detail a bit later. But first, I wanted to start out with your background and how you got involved in all of these entrepreneurial endeavors.
Sure. It's an interesting story because I never had any intention of becoming an entrepreneur. And even saying that now sounds a little bit weird to me. So just a little bit about my background. I graduated from Cal State Fullerton in 2005, which is a small state school here in California, Southern California. And I graduated with a bachelor's in marketing. And then right after I graduated, I moved to Seattle and I lived there for quite some time. And for the first 6 years of post-college, I actually had 10 different jobs. I bounced around media buyer. I did some advertising. I did recruiting. I even worked at Yellow Pages at one point. So it was just really weird, and I couldn't really figure out what it is that I wanted to do or what I was even good at. And I had a lot of friends in Seattle and Los Angeles who were all beginning their careers right after college, right? I mean, I had friends who were working at Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all these amazing companies, and I was just this guy bouncing around. And then at some point within those 6 years, I actually got I started speaking with a headhunter, and I was telling him what I wanted to do, and he was trying to figure out how to help me. And I just happened to ask him, I said, hey, if you help me with this job, how much money are you going to make off of me? And he told me the number, and it wasn't high or anything, but to me it was high, right? So I said, well, how would I be able to do what you do, right? How can I work here at your company? He said, well, if you really want to work here, we do have this entry-level program where we bring in people who have practically no experience, which I didn't, and put them through this trainee program. And that company was called Aerotech. So it was a staffing agency, and I applied, I interviewed, and I got the job, and I just started working there. And then from there, I bounced around from different agencies. So I still couldn't hold on to any one job. The longest job I ever had before that was for a year and like 6 months. So I moved from agency to agency, and I really didn't enjoy working for these huge multi-billion-dollar staffing agencies. I worked for Robert Half, I worked for Volt, and a few others. And I don't think that the experience was as genuine as I thought it should be, right? When
Hmm.
recruiters work with candidates, there's always some hesitancy on the candidate's side, right? They don't really like
Right.
working with recruiters, but they almost have to. And recruiters usually are kind of incentivized to force candidates into a job so that way they can
Hmm.
get paid. So
Right.
anyway, I just didn't want to be part of that. And so in January of 2012, I said to myself, look, I know as much as I possibly can know about recruiting at this point. So why not start my own agency? So I actually, TrueBridge at that time was established in Atlanta and they wanted a West Coast presence. And so they approached a couple of us, me and an old colleague of mine, and they said, "Look, we'll give you guys equity, but you open it up in LA, and you guys will give you the keys to run the business however you see fit."
Wow.
Yeah, and so
Great
that
deal.
that was how I got into entrepreneurship. Was TrueBridge.
Okay. Great. So we covered a lot of ground there. So I'm gonna go in there and start picking the pieces a little bit. I'm particularly curious about your experiences as a recent grad jumping around jobs and eventually continuing to jumping around jobs even after you kind of found your calling card. So I'm just wondering, looking back, what do you think were the reasons that you felt that restlessness at every single job you had?
If I could be completely honest, the answer to that is I was just looking for the shortcut to wealth. And I thought, hey, if I leave one company, I can try to make more money on the next offer and the next one and the next one. And on top of that, I never really just knew what I loved to do. And I felt envious, right? I was very jealous of all my friends who were making what I thought was good salaries, and they were.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be at the level they were in terms of financial stability and even prestige. I just thought, how come I can't have what they want? So I would just jump from job to job, thinking if I go from one place to another, I could leverage my old experience and make more money. So that's really what I was doing. It's pretty sad.
Okay. So I guess when we're young, we always make mistakes that we look back on. But when you talk about moving to different jobs and getting paid more each time, would you say all of your jobs had a common lining, or were they in different industries? Were you kind of trying out different things as well, in addition to?
For the most part, but most of the roles I was going into were somewhat incentive based, right? So they were some form of sales or account management where I had to do some form of selling in order to,
Okay.
yeah. So I knew what it meant early on, at least, to hustle and work hard, and those traits would eventually play really well into TrueBridge, and then once I started getting into more entrepreneurial roles.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So I loved your story about how you met that the recruiter and you asked him the question, how can I do what you did? And what was it that attracted you about recruitment? Because there is definitely a selling aspect to it, but is there also the aspect of finding the fit between people and job positions?
There is, right? So for me, again, I was looking at it in the most incorrect way possible. He told me the amount of money he'd make on me, and that was more than I'd ever made off of any sort of sale. And that's initially what drew me, was just the money. And again, so I went into this industry, the staffing industry, for all the wrong reasons. And I think that's one of the biggest lures that staffing agencies have when they recruit, or people earlier on in their career. They say, look, it's extremely lucrative and you can be part of this industry and make a lot of money, and all you have to do is put people to work. That's the biggest draw. But
Hmm.
it's not until you flip the switch, and I flipped it really late, but it's not until you flip the switch and realize, look, I can't accomplish any of my goals until I help other people accomplish theirs, right? So it's not until you really understand a candidate's career aspirations and start to empathize with them. It's not until that point, at least for me, it wasn't until then that things started to turn around for me for the good.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. My sister was actually a recruiter a few years ago.
Oh,
And
really?
I actually, as somebody with a web development background in Chicago, you get approached by recruiters a lot. So
Right.
I can definitely understand that. A lot of times my interactions with recruiters are automated LinkedIn messages or like random phone calls, emails. And I think a lot of recruiters give off a very impersonal vibe, as if it's just like matching resource to needs, almost like a supply demand kind of thing, which it is. But everyone would like to think that there should be more of a human aspect behind it.
All right. They'll probably say something like, "Oh, it looks like you've used PHP and MySQL, so you're really good fit for this job because it says PHP and MySQL on the job description."
Yeah, pretty much. And it's interesting because I noticed the profile of these companies are all very similar. They tend to be suburban enterprise companies. So
Yep.
very interesting there. So was there any specific moment where you flipped the switch and kind of realized that you should be approaching recruiting in a more human-centered fashion?
Yeah, and when we launched TrueBridge Resources in Los Angeles, in the first 8 or 9 months, we lost a little bit over $700,000. And then my colleague at the time left, and so it was kind of just me by myself for a month, and then we brought on another partner, and it was just this time of self-reflection, right? Because at this point, I was now 7.5 years removed from undergrad, and I had nothing, right? Almost kind of like, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
I've been in recruiting for 4 years or 3 years, and I'm still not successful, but I know how to recruit. So what is wrong? And it wasn't until I really took a step back and I said, and I actually re-examined everything, like from the moment I pick up a phone call to the end of everything of that call. I
Right.
started thinking, how do I sound, right? Who am I, and what does that candidate hear on the other end? And what the answer
Hmm.
was really scary and sad, was that candidate was talking to a recruiter similar to what we talked about. He
Yeah.
was talking to a recruiter who sounded greedy, who was sounded like he just wanted to make a quick sale, right? And make some commission and move on. And so that's what flipped the switch. We lost a bunch of money. My colleague left. I'd been in the working world now for 7.5 years, and I almost had nothing to show for it. And so I
Oh,
said, I have to change who I am as a person if I
hmm.
really want to be successful. And I wanted nothing more than to be successful. And at that time, what I envisioned as success was completely different than what I do now. But that's how that switch flipped for me.
Right. It's so bizarre to me because it sounds like you're doing all the industry best practices, which points to kind of a broken system, so to speak.
It's true. I think the staffing industry is very results driven,
Hmm.
and there's like a paradigm shift when you go further away from being results driven and you actually just focus on process and you focus on like the human aspect of it. Things, magic happens. That's what I believe.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because the way you're saying it just seems so obvious. So along that train of thought, after you re-examined your own process, what were some of the changes that you made, and how did that translate into the results that you saw?
So that's a good question, and there's no one thing I think that I did or that we did. It was a multitude of things. The biggest of which was that we started to not sound like every other recruiter in the industry. And what we did was we would pick up the phone and say, "Hey, listen, Victor,
Hmm.
we're a very new staffing agency. We work with a lot of different companies in the
Hmm.
area. I want to see if you'd be interested in spending some time talking to me about your career aspirations. And once I understand that, I'll do whatever I can to help you find that and bridge the gap between where you're at now and where you want to be." And then I actually truly meant that. And we truly did that. So to build our name and to build our brand, in the first year, I was speaking to maybe 35 people to about 70 people every day. So it would double.
Wow.
Every day I would just my goal was I need to talk to 35 people a day. And if I can go well above that, I'll do that. And all of those people, what I did was I shared that same message. I said, I might not be able to help you, but I'll do
Uh-huh.
everything in my power to do it, to try. And that's what changed, because once I got off the phone with you, then I sat down and I said, here's everything Victor wants to do, and
Mhm.
here's every way I could possibly help him to do that. So then I'd pick up the phone and I'd start calling a bunch of different companies. I'd say, hey, listen, I spoke to this great candidate. This is why I think it would benefit if the two
Mhm.
of you talked or met for coffee or whatever. And slowly that approach started working, right? Because
Yeah.
companies and candidates started relating to that. They're like, hey, this guy's not pressuring me into one job or the other. He's just learning about who I am and what I want and seeing if he can help me figure that out.
Okay. That's super interesting. I just want to ask more questions about the recruiting process and things like
Sure.
that. So how do you think that process compared to your old process if you were to just compare it side by side?
The old process was I have this job in my hand that a client is paying me a bunch of money to fill. So
Uh-huh.
I'm going to call any candidate that seems remotely good for it and then force them in the best way I can to take that job. And then what happens is
Huh.
when you're recruiting that way, you're
Right.
really not paying attention to what the client really wants or what the candidate wants, more importantly. So then you just start throwing resumes at the client, at these employers, and hoping that one of those resumes sticks, versus now
Okay.
carefully understanding what it is that all of these people want out of their lives and out of their careers, and then matching that very specifically and carefully with what I have available, or if I don't have it available, I'll go out and try to find it.
Got it. That sounds brilliant, and it sounds like exactly what how things should be, because you're not just trying to. There's so much more to just matching somebody with a job. It's really about, does this help propel them forward in their career, and as we all know, like, your professional life can have huge implications on all aspects of your life. So
It's so true. When people are looking for a job, what most recruiters don't understand is that is the most one of the most important times of their lives, right? I
mhm,
mean, a new job means so many things. It means more savings. It means putting your kids into a better school. It means a vacation. It means a new home. It means whatever, right? So, a new job is one of the most important things anybody's ever going to go through, or when they're looking for a new job. Sorry, it's one of the most
yeah.
important times of their lives. And so, when you look at it that way, it's kind of like, hey, I can't mess around here, and I can't act like I don't care. I have to care.
Yeah, because you almost have that responsibility to the person.
Exactly.
So tell me, you implemented those practices. You've seen a huge upturn with TrueBridge's results. What happened afterwards?
So in the LA office at that time, this was now 2013. We'd been doing it for like 14 months, and
Mhm.
after we lost 700,000, we changed all this. In 6 months, we not only broke, we turned a profit, but we broke the $1 million mark, and we went from negative 700,000, and then in the span of 6.5 months we went to positive 1.6 million. And so
Wow.
we figured out how to what we were doing, and we tried to figure out what is this method to all this madness. And we grew so
Hmm.
fast, we started hiring new recruiters. We hired more salespeople in our office, and we taught them everything we were doing at that time. And
Right.
it was very refreshing for those who came into our world, especially from coming from other
Hmm.
staffing agencies, because we said, look, we're not going to judge you on metrics. We're not going to force you to just make a bunch of placements. We want you to do things right, and here's how we believe
Right.
we're doing things right. And so we told them, follow suit and things will grow. So we then quickly became a $3 million office, then a 5 million. Then we we figured out what we were doing, and we put a method around it, a process around it, and we then scaled it and trained all the other recruiters in our company. And we partnered with a management consulting firm. We trained all these recruiters, and then we scaled from like 4 offices to 9 offices, and we ended up hitting around like $75 million in revenue within like 4 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of growth in a short period of time. And so when did the acquisition take place then?
This January of 2016.
Oh, okay.
So they had acquired us, and they kept almost everybody on board.
Oh, that's nice.
Hmm.
Why break a something that's not broken, you know?
Yeah, I agree. But any acquisition and anytime a company wants to acquire another company, there's some hidden agenda behind it. Whether it's good or bad, there's always hidden agenda. So when we got acquired, when TrueBridge got acquired by North Highland, it seemed like it made sense in a lot of ways. North Highland adopted a lot of the same views and cultural practices that TrueBridge did. So we were very happy with the transaction and the
Hmm.
merger. But I ultimately left because then it felt like another big company again, right?
Right.
So and after I got my first taste of entrepreneurship, I didn't want to just go back to another big company and be another corporate guy. And not there's nothing wrong with it. Just now at that point in my life, it didn't feel like it was the right fit for me.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense because once you get that thrill and that excitement of building something of your own, I think it's hard for anyone to really go back to anything else. So at that point when you decided to leave TrueBridge, did you have something in mind for the next step already? How did you manage this crossroads?
For some time before I left, I actually started a small coaching practice where I
Hmm.
would try to work with some young professionals and then also recent college grads in helping them figure out how they wanted to go out and find meaningful work. Because
Right.
it took me so long to find it, but I finally did it and I loved it and I excelled
Hmm.
at it. So I thought, well, why stop at me? Why not try to share what I have learned and how to build a career that I'm proud of and that I love working on every single day and teach that to other people. And I don't think that most universities in the States do a good job of teaching that to their students. So
Not at all.
so that I felt like um, I wanted to coach. So I started coaching. And when I left TrueBridge or when we left North Thailand, I just decided to focus more on the coaching and growing that practice.
That's what became Career Sprout.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's Career Sprout.
Okay. And I'd love to jump into Career Sprout, but right before that, I want to press you on when that transformation came. Like you mentioned that when you first changed your processes at TrueBridge, it was still out of a desire to become successful, to turn things around at the company. But when was the point when recruiting really became something more personal, where it had more of like you wanted to make a societal impact and have a positive influence on people?
It was two things, but the shift that I made mentally was it was kind of like a game. And I said every single day I woke up, I said, I'm just going to try to help as many people better their careers as I can today. Right? So whatever that meant. I mean, if I didn't even know what that meant, but I just knew
Mhm.
the more people I talk to, the more people I meet with, if I can help them better their careers in some sort of way, whether it's
Yeah.
helping them make more money, finding them a better company to work for, whatever, I'm going to do it. And that's when the shift happened because then it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what other people wanted and how can I help them achieve that. That was a shift. That was
Wow.
number one. And the second thing that happened was we landed when I was at TrueBridge. We landed SpaceX as one of our clients for a short time. And when we went to
Whoa.
SpaceX to visit with them, I saw Elon Musk, and I didn't get to talk to him or anything like that, but I saw him, and it was this very surreal experience. At that time, I actually called my fiance, who now is my wife, and I called her and I said, hey, it was just a surreal experience meeting Elon Musk or seeing Elon Musk and seeing everything that this person has built. And he did it all because he just wants to improve our society and he wants to help human beings progress. Now, by no means am I comparing myself to Elon Musk, and staffing is not rocket science, literally. But I thought, man, if I can even just take the mindset and infuse it into TrueBridge and try to help as many people as we come across in our business, maybe our business will blow up like his, right? I mean, that guy's done
Right.
so
Yeah.
much. And I said, I can't be afraid of working hard. I can't be afraid of failing. I just can't because he's done so much. and I'm like nothing compared to that. So I have nothing to lose.
Yeah, have you read his biography? The one that came out last year.
No, which one?
I think it's the one by Ashley Vance. It's fantastic though. It goes into a ton of detail about his upbringing, and you're totally right. Like if at any given point in time you're like, I'm tired, I want to throw in the towel, just think about Elon Musk because
it's
he's probably worked much harder than you.
it's so true, and that's the funny thing. I don't want to get us off topic, but some people just don't want to work 100 hours a week, and that's okay because even though he works 100 hours a week, he's built three huge businesses, right? He wants to colonize Mars. Um, there's other parts of his life that have suffered. His personal relationships. He's had, I think, like 4 divorces and whatever it is. So it's just there's this balance, and I think
Absolutely.
I don't want other people to feel like I'm saying if you're not working like Elon Musk, you're not working. That's not the
Yeah.
case. I wasn't
So
even working that hard.
So how do you actually balance that when it comes to people you talk to about the career aspirations? Because I'm sure from these conversations, you get a good sample size of different types of people. Some people might be workaholics, some other people might be looking for something more relaxing and more chill. And I think both are totally okay.
You and I both went to this Hive Global Leaders Conference, right? I feel like the central theme of that conference is figuring out what our purpose is and then going after it.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of exercises in this program, and a lot of it is asking ourselves, what do we like to do? What can we get paid for, right? And how can we help the world? So those three questions are really important anytime I think anyone that I coach has to answer, because you're right, some people just want to make a decent living and spend a lot of time with their friends and family. Others want to climb up a corporate ladder. Other people want to be entrepreneurs. So whatever that question or that answer is to everyone is very different, but there's certainly steps you have to take to get to each one, right? So when I work with people, I think we sit down and we examine what are those steps and what is it that you like to do, and what areas are you going to face some uncertainty, and how do we overcome that, right?
Yeah, no, and I think we're on to something very, very important that I think it's very important for our audience to understand. And that's how important asking yourself these very honest questions about what you want and how allowing yourself to be honest with yourself can lead to amazing results. So I'd love to take a tangent and go more into the psyche of how you approach and how you actually coach your clients.
It's a good transition, and you know this just as well as I do. Someone like yourself who left the corporate world to go and work for yourself. The central premise to my coaching is, if we're going to work together, you have to be ready to become audacious, right? And you have to have audacity. And what I mean by that is you have to feel like you deserve great things for yourself, no matter what. That it starts with that, right? So when I coach anyone, I'm encouraging them to step out of their comfort zones. I'm encouraging them to figure out everything that they love to do, and then figure
Yeah.
out how are you going to actually go and get paid for that. So once we figure out those few things, then I say, okay, now let's start bridging the gap. You like doing X, Y, and Z. Who do you know that is doing those things and also making money while doing it, right?
Right.
So then they figure that out. Then I say, why don't you now pick up the phone and call that person? Even if they don't know them, just call them or send them an email. But more importantly, I say call them and then follow up with an email. And let's say you come up with a list of 15 people just in the world who are doing what you would love to do, but they're getting
Mhm.
paid for it, and you don't know how to get there. Well, then you have some audacity. Pick up the phone and call them. So I start helping my coachees, or my clients, just figure out a roadmap to getting to where you want to be. And that
Mhm.
roadmap usually involves finding mentors and finding other people who are doing what you're doing, calling them, talking to them, figuring out a way to get in front of them, or get on a call with them, or email correspondence with them, and
Mhm.
have them help you. And if you
Yeah.
reach out to enough people, believe it or not, someone is going to help.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to be able to interact with people who are already doing what you're doing because on one hand, it shows you this is possible, and on the other hand, they can tell you some of the things that they experienced that and through their wisdom you can potentially avoid a lot of the obstacles that they had to face.
Absolutely. And you never know who that person knows, right? And you might even find out by talking to that person that, hey, this is actually not what I want to do. I realize that I
Mm.
want to do something completely different. You have to take that time in your life to figure out what is it that you want to do for the rest of your life. And a lot of people don't do that, and especially right after college. And that's where I like to catch them because, the trend for most recent graduates is to take the first job that they can get. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem becomes they take the first job they can get and then they get stuck within that industry or they get stuck within they're pigeonholed now. So they try to find
Yeah.
another job that's just slightly better than that job and then they keep doing that over and over and over and then they realize 10, 15 years down the line that this is not what I ever wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
They get so entrenched that the opportunity cost of switching away becomes higher and higher. I see this a lot as well with people. It's like, oh, why did you take this job? Oh, it's just, I figured it would be a first job, or this is just, the first offer that I got. And
mhm. Or it pays the bills.
yeah, I hate that response. And I think you're totally right. You have to be audacious, and people miss out when they don't take their chance to reach out to people outside of their network.
Exactly. And a lot of people just don't know how to articulate how their skills and who they are can benefit another company or an employer, right? Because not everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to be an entrepreneur. Some people just to want to articulate their skill sets or identify what their transferable skills are and then highlight or market those to these potential employers that they would love to work for, right? So when I work with them, I teach them how to do that. And then, there's also things that they should do. Like, for example, I have some people who, one of my clients, she wanted to work for the state of Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And so she already knew what she wanted.
Right.
And she was working on a very local level. So I said, look, let's start talking about and listing all of your
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments in the last 3 years. And then once we figure that out, we'll articulate it. We'll put it nice and pat in your resume and maybe even your cover letter and your LinkedIn profile. And then let's start reaching out to the people who are working at the state level that could actually help you, even if you don't know them. And you know what
Mm-hmm.
she ended up doing? She ended up picking up the phone and calling the mayor of the city of Houston.
Wow.
And he talked to her and he set up a lunch with her. And lo and behold, 6 weeks later, 2, 3 interviews later, now she had the dream job that she ever wanted. And
That's amazing.
it's funny because like she kept thanking me and I said, all I told you to do was pick up the phone and call. Everything else was you, but it takes audacity again, right? Going back to that word and going
Mm-hmm.
back to that. It takes a little bit of that to kind of get where you want to go.
Yeah. No, I love your story, and it's just so interesting to me because it seems like what you're pioneering is essentially a new kind of recruiting where it's completely human centered. And it seemed like, based on what you said, your goal is just to help your client find out what it is that they want, to articulate it, and help them come up with a game plan. And it seems like sometimes it might result in them applying for a job. Other times, the realization might be that they want to do their own thing.
Right.
And I think that's just really cool because it doesn't sound like all the emotions and everything I think of when I hear recruiting. I,
Right.
I almost I almost feel like you need to come up with a new word for it.
Yeah, I don't know what that word is. I just choose not to ever say the word recruiter on the phone ever.
Yeah, so I think coach sounds better.
Yeah.
So along the lines of that, can you talk a little bit more about your foray into Career Sprout and how things are going so far?
Career Sprout's been great. I didn't, when I started it, I never anticipated it growing to where it is now. And it's led to a few speaking opportunities. It's led to collaboration with a few other really talented people, and just the amount of people, the sheer coaching clients I've got to work with has been a very surreal and very fulfilling experience for me
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, I get very emotional about this, but just when the first phone call I ever have with any of my clients, and then that
Mm-hmm.
last phone call I have with them, just the amount of change that happens within that time frame
Wow. Yeah.
is amazing because sometimes people just don't know how much potential they have in them.
Absolutely.
And all it takes is for somebody to tell you, "Hey, you matter, your life matters, your work matters. Just go out there
Mm-hmm.
and do a few things that you probably didn't think you could ever do, but they're not even that hard, right?" And just
Yeah.
and so Career Sprout in that sense has been great, and it's grown really well, and yeah, so I couldn't be happier with it.
No, it makes me so glad to hear. And for some reason, I just kind of understood the name, what the name really represents. With like what you discussed, working with people who are just starting out their careers, and now I have a very nice image of like a career. And then your logo has like a plant sprouting as well. I remember.
Yeah,
It's all coming together.
I can't take credit for that though. There was one of my friends. His name is Neil Patel, and he has a blog called Quick Sprout, and it's a growth. I think it's content marketing. But anyway, I took his website and I just stole it, and I said I'm gonna call mine Career Sprout now.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
yours. It's yours. So my next question for you is great. So you're making an impact through coaching, and but coaching is very much a one-on-one mechanism. And when we think about a business, we talk about scalability. So in order to really accomplish your vision of being able to impact more people, what ideas do you have coming up ahead? Is it like seminars, reaching out to more people at once, or is it creating video content? Because I think perhaps through your experiences in coaching, you have a pretty well oiled system in place. So I'm very curious to hear about what that next step is for Career Sprout.
I can't give away all my secrets yet, but there are there are a few things that I'm working on. So I'm working on a book um, that I'm co-writing with somebody else who's in this
Hmm.
space.
Right.
But there's a few other businesses that I'm also involved with, and one company I'm involved with is called June. And so June plans to change the way the recruiting industry works. So we have a few products that are currently in
Hmm.
beta, which is why I can't talk about them, but they're
Gotcha.
currently in beta and we're testing them out with a few clients and then we're tweaking. But ideally, if we can replicate what we did at TrueBridge Resources
Hmm.
and change the recruiting industry from being results driven to process and driven, and then so many candidates and job seekers will
Yeah.
benefit from that. That's how we plan on scaling it essentially. So, and then yeah, I plan on speaking more, and I want to eventually create some more training tools, formalized training tools, and make those available for as a resource for my clients, and then actually anyone who wants to use it.
Yeah, because some of the strategies, it's like what you said, people just need someone to tell them that they can do this. But moving to June, I think it's an amazing idea because I when I was thinking about this, I only thought about this from a B2C perspective, like you interacting with people who are looking for jobs essentially. But now that you brought up June and trying to reach out to other recruiting staffing companies to really make a dent in this industry, I think that's amazing, and that's thinking big. It's a very very Elon Musk thing to do.
I don't know about that. Well, it's more of a wait and see. I mean, I hope we can make the dent, like you say, and we hope we can change some perceptions of recruiters and what they're doing, right? And
Yeah.
helping them to realize that they're not just putting people to work, they're actually helping people with their lives. Because
Hmm.
the motto that we used to have was it's just a job for us, but it's actually their life, right?
Yeah.
So if you think of it that way, you might start behaving differently.
And are you seeing that are a lot of staffing agencies starting to pick up this more human centered way of looking at recruitment, or would you say it's still early days in the fight?
No, I've seen a good amount of them. Our industry, because now more than ever, right, in the day
Mm-hmm.
and age we live in, people look for authenticity in a brand, right? They look for that and they look
Sure.
for transparency. So a lot of these old school staffing companies are becoming obsolete because they aren't authentic, they're not transparent. And
Mm-hmm.
so what you're seeing now is more of that in newer staffing agencies that are coming out. And for example, there's one, the Muse is a
Mm-hmm.
staffing agency that does that. Hired is another one. They're both amazing companies. They're founded on those principles, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, Muse is a very cool one because I most of my interactions with Muse have been through the articles in their blog. They do a fantastic job with that.
Right, yeah.
And I think Hired does a really cool job because it's somewhat of an invite only system where you have to be vetted by members of that community and also by members of the well, Hired will also vet you as well.
Right.
So these are all new approaches to staffing, and I think that complemented with a human-centered approach, I think good things are ahead for job seekers in the future.
I hope so. We have some companies that are pioneering that human-centered approach, so and really running with it. So hopefully other companies follow suit.
Yeah, and you guys are leading the charge. You guys are at the forefront of that. So excited to hear more after you guys work with your first few clients.
Thanks. You'll have to have me back, and I'd be happy to share.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a part two. So we're reaching around the end of our time. So how can people follow you or learn more about the initiatives that you're up to?
Just reach out to me. So you can follow me at on Twitter, and it's just at Gaurav Valani. Same thing with Snapchat at Gaurav Valani. Career Sprout is careersprout.net. And then on LinkedIn and a few other places like Medium, I every now and then I'll write some articles.
Yeah, you write great articles.
Oh, I appreciate it, man.
I can
Um,
attest.
so, so actually, likewise, I read a lot of your articles too. So, you're actually a really good writer.
Now people are gonna be skeptical because they'll be like everyone's promoting each other in the podcast.
No,
But
it's not like that. But yeah, so if that's how people want to follow me, then that they can reach out in those ways, and I'm happy to
uh,
always help. And I do my best to return every email, every message, every phone call I ever get. So I'm not that hard to get a hold of.
awesome. So we'll definitely include all the different channels that you listed in the show notes. But for now, I just wanted to thank you so much for hopping on a call. I learned so much about the staffing industry, and thank you so much for sharing your journey in finding your passion. And now you're also helping other people finding their passion. So I think it's really awesome how everything's come full circle. And I wish you all the best moving forward.
I appreciate it, Victor. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's a wrap for my interview with Gaurav. If you want to find out more about Gaurav and his adventures, along with more information about everything we talked about, visit theremotelifestyle.com/7. There you'll find the show notes for this week's episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Remote Podcast. Be sure to leave a review of the show so that I can continue to improve it. If you like what you heard, go ahead and hit subscribe so that you never miss out on an episode. If you're ready to take the leap and live the remote lifestyle, text the word remote to 38470 to sign up for our free email course titled Become a Digital Nomad in 7 Steps, even if you have no idea where to start. The course will take you from sitting in your office wondering what to do with your life to having a plan of action to live and work remotely. So make sure you don't miss out by texting the word remote to 38470 or by going to the URL theremotelifestyle.com/remote. That's all for now, and I'll see you on the next episode.